let's go to another subject which hasn't been too cheery, and that is the question of whether the United Kingdom is going to allow Zelensky, a man with no military training, whatever, to bomb Russia with partly UK-generated weapons. Coming, joining me now is an expert of that part of the world and historian, Marcus Papadopoulos. Good to see you again, Marcus. How are you doing? Sorry, Dr. Marcus. I don't want to diss your education. What do you make of this story that apparently these Storm Shadow missiles, which are partly produced by the UK, which Zelensky wants to use into Russia, might actually be approved by the UK, but not others?
My two initial observations are as follows. Firstly, for the Storm missiles to have a major bearing on the war in Ukraine, the Ukrainian army would have to be supplied with thousands of them and on a regular basis. Secondly, for almost the last 2 years, the Ukrainian army has been using NATO weaponry and firing it into Russia. So if Storm missiles were to be fired into Russia, this would not be anything new. Now, what I'm about to say runs contrary to what a lot of commentators have been saying in the last few days, and indeed the last couple of years. There will not be a World War III. Why? Because the elites of the elite in both America and Russia have been talking to each other every day, every week, every month, year on year, ever since the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis. What I call the elite of the elites encompasses the politics, the military, and the intelligence sectors of both America and Russia. These are people whom you will never see on television, and you will never even know their names. Since the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, their task has been to ensure that America and Russia will never go to war with each other. Again, I am not talking about Biden, I'm not talking about Putin, I'm not talking about other members of their cabinets. I'm talking about people who work behind the scenes. As I said, they talk to each other on a daily basis regarding military affairs, regarding nuclear affairs. They have maintained peace between the two superpowers for many, many decades now. Regarding the British ruling elite and their useful puppets, their useful idiots, specifically Starmer and Lammy, well, the pair of them went to America last week and the Americans put them in their place. They said to them they will not consent to Storm missiles being fired into Russia. Now, the Americans, despite my loathing of American foreign policy, I do recognize and I am grateful that the elite of the elite in America do not want a war with Russia. And on numerous occasions in history, the Americans have had to put the British in their place. So, for example, Eisenhower put Eden in his place during the Suez Canal Crisis, and also Bill Clinton put Tony Blair in his place during NATO's bombing of Serbia, because Blair was pushing Clinton to launch a ground invasion of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. If Starmer thinks he can give the go-ahead for Storm missiles to be fired into Russia without American approval, then there could be a serious rupture in what is known as the special relationship. But again, people need to be absolutely clear. Starmer and Lammy are useful idiots. Their knowledge of international relations is exclusively confined to Wikipedia. It's the people at the heart of the British ruling elite who are pushing for this. But again, the Americans have to give their consent for Storm missiles to be fired into Russia. And so far, the Americans have told London the answer is no.
That's really interesting. And I have to say, I find it reassuring. It's worth pointing out, incidentally, that 1,800 Storm missiles, which would still probably not make that much difference because most of them would be blown out of the sky before they land. 1,800 Storm missiles are worth the same amount as the winter fuel allowance, which they're about to steal off 10 million pensioners. Just putting it out there. You're also saying something quite interesting, which I have to say, my opinion, I accord with. David Lammy has absolutely no competence to do the job he's been given. And Keir Starmer doesn't look like a credible international statesman. What, in your view, is the perspective of the Americans towards their new buddy, Starmer?
Well, it depends who you are referring to when you say the Americans, because quite frankly, there's no difference between Biden and Starmer. There's no difference between Lammy and his counterpart in Washington. These are the facilitators. These are the implementers. If you are talking about the heart of the American ruling elite, then no doubt they will regard the likes of Starmer and Lammy as a laughingstock. But again, let's just be clear. When the Conservatives were in power, look at Liz Truss, who was the Foreign Secretary. As I refer to her, another useful idiot. This was someone who couldn't differentiate the Baltic Sea from the Black Sea. Again, these people have no competence whatsoever. They are put into those jobs because they are yes men or they are yes women. Is it terrible damage to Britain's standing in the world? Well, yes, on the one hand, but on the other hand, Britain has no standing whatsoever in the world now when it comes to reputation. We also heard recently that the Americans and the British claim that Iran has supplied Russia with ballistic missiles. Well, again, Lembit, any enlightened person would know that that is ludicrous, because the Russian military-industrial complex has been tasked ever since 1947, the start of the Cold War, with sustaining the Russian military in a war with America. It follows, therefore, that Russia does not need ammunition or ballistic missiles or tanks from any other country in the world. But what does it demonstrate? Well, it partly demonstrates that the Western ruling elites, through their various media outlets, feel emboldened enough to tell the audiences of the Western world that Russia is a third-rate power, because they know that the average person in the Western world, such as in America or in Britain, is an ignorant, gullible fool. And they really do believe that Russia is a third-rate power. We even hear people, useful idiots, writing columns in the Telegraph or in the Guardian, saying that the Russian nuclear arsenal is not to be taken seriously. This really borders on insanity. Whether these people writing it believe it or not, I do not know. Of course, they are paid to write this, but the average British person, Lembit, in the 1960s or the 1970s would never, ever have entertained the claim that the Russian nuclear arsenal is not to be taken seriously.
Thank you for that. And let's hope there are some in America who do realize the gravity with which it should be taken. It's worth remembering Russia was first into space with a satellite of 1957. Russia was first in space with a human, 1961. And Russia was first into space with multi-astronaut capsules, as far as I recall. So we ignore their capabilities at our peril and to our foolishness. One other thing, though, Marcus, Mingling a Ding Dong says, not even useful, just useless idiots. I think that's perhaps even better. Thank you so much, Marcus. We'll get you back pretty soon. And have to say, I want to find reassurance in what you said. It's reassuring to think that there are some hands that rock the cradle, because frankly, David Lammy politically should be in a pram.